The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host, guest, random reptoid, or chupacabra may not necessarily reflect those of AM 950 Radio, its affiliates, or its sponsors. Now, it's time to step into the unknown. There are things people experience but never talk about. A shadow moving in the corner, flickering of the lights, a disembodied voice. We invite you to talk with us. Share your story, share your experience, because this isn't just your story, this is our story. This is GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun.
And this is GhostBox Radio on AM 950, where every night we talk about the paranormal, ufology, Bigfoot, and so much more. My name is Greg Bakun. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Let me introduce Jesse first. Jesse is a certified master hypnotist and a transformative leader in the field of hypnotherapy. He holds a diploma from the nationally accredited Hypnosis Motivational Institute in Tarzana, California, blending advanced training with extensive real-world experience. Before embarking on his hypnotherapy journey, Jesse was dedicated firefighter paramedic. His pioneering efforts led to the creation of the Paramedic Emergency Transportation Program for the Sacramento Fire Department. Now, as president of the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies, he advocated tirelessly for the community's welfare and safety. Jesse's academic and professional background is equally impressive. He was a member of the Mathematics, Engineering, and Science Association at UC Davis and is certified in blood and airborne pathogens by Sacramento State University. Additionally, he co-founded California's third largest internet service provider, focusing on proprietary programming and pioneer high-speed data transmissions via microwave technology. Currently, Jesse serves as the visionary president of Cosmic Clarity Connections, LLC. This innovative organization bridges the gap between science, space, and spirituality through accessible seminars. We're going to be talking about hidden and covert technologies today, and it's going to be very interesting and kind of going into an area I never really thought we'd be going into. So tonight, folks, I think we're going to have a very, very interesting conversation. Jesse, welcome to GhostBox Radio.
Hi, Greg, and thank you for giving me this platform, and I'm happy to be on your show.
Well, once we got the audio figured out, and it just kind of fell apart there at the beginning, but we're back now, and let's just get started with it. Let's just get right into it. When I originally read the email and the information that you provided me, one of the things that stood out in my mind is the term covert technology. What is that?
Okay, well, covert technologies are any type of tech that is utilized to infer or transmit signals to a person or a victim unknowingly. And what has probably hit the mainstream recently is, most people probably heard this, is called the Havana Syndrome, or anomalous health incidences. And the Havana Syndrome was first brought to the attention of the United States in 2016 by our diplomats in Havana, Cuba. They were complaining of an acute onset of unusual sounds that they were hearing, and followed by headaches, nausea, vertigo, and short-term, long-term memory issues and electrical shocks to the extremities. Mm-hmm. Now, the United States didn't initially take it seriously. They thought it was some type of psychological or hysteria phenomenon, and they took it seriously after the Canadian diplomats started complaining about the same thing. Now, on March 8 of 2024, this year, the Department of Homeland Security held a hearing, and one of the gentlemen to testify was retired Lieutenant Colonel Greg Bakun. And what Colonel Bakun testified to is that this phenomenon is real, and it is happening here in our homeland, and it's happening not only to our diplomats, but the best of the people in our CIA and FBI departments, and there are a few cases that are currently being reported by politicians in Washington, D.C. area. Now, where I come into this picture is They only testified that this is happening to federal employees. And it was really first reported in 2014 to the federal government, but they took it seriously in 2016. Now, myself and a couple of other gentlemen created an organization called the International Center Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies, and I was the president. And the reason we came up with that organization is because in 2009, 2010, we were documenting these cases here in the United States. And it all started by the help of a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Hall. He was the author of two books. The first book was A New Breed Satellite Terrorism in America, and the second book is called Guinea Pigs, Technologies of Control. Now, he had expressed to me when I met him in Texas is that he had been meeting individuals who were complaining about these exact same symptoms. And the problem back then is there was no such thing as the Havana syndrome or anomalous health incidences back then.
Sure.
What would happen is they would go to their general practitioners and they would be diagnosed as soon as you give these symptoms of hearing these acute onset of weird sounds with a mental disorder, and they would be railroaded into the mental health industry, put on drugs, which never helped them, and they would be re-victimized again. So what I decided to do is take these subjective complaints and create a way that we could start to measure these in a study. And so our first meeting was held in Sacramento, California, and I was surprised. We had 100 people show up, and they all complained of the exact same symptoms, identical to what the Havana syndrome and our diplomats are complaining about.
Okay.
And there was very little deviation. And so what we decided to do was start doing RF testing, just like Dr. Hall was doing. And RF testing was done with a little frequency detector, and we have various wands. And because they were complaining about the signal, we said, well, if there is a signal, we should be able to detect something. So we started doing this in Davis, California, and at that meeting, 300 people showed up. I was completely amazed.
Wow.
And what the data started showing is that there was a phenomenon happening. And the most affected during that time were Caucasian females, recently single, widowed, or divorced. And they were coming up positive with around very focal areas around their person. Then it was Caucasian males, African American females, African American males, then Asians, the same, and it dwindled down in ethnicity. We did this in the Midwest, exact same results, and until we got to the East Coast, it flipped a little bit where Caucasian and African American criteria sort of flipped. African Americans were the most affected.
Okay.
And this continued all the way to the shores of the East Coast with one exception. I was invited to Virginia by a group of folks, and it was about 80 to 100 people there. And they were all military subcontractors, and I found that to be odd. But it was at that meeting that I decided to start checking for suggestibility, and this is where the hypnosis portion comes in. I became certified in 2014, but I was seeing a phenomenon. The people who were most affected were those who were highly suggestible. Okay, the way our testing process works, we do a preliminary RF scan with the JM20 Pro that I just showed you. And then if they came up positive back then, we were asking them to get a panoramic x-ray of the jaw area, an MRI scan, if they could obtain that. And then ultimately what we would want to do was what's called a nonlinear junction scan. And we would want to do that in an environment with what is called an anechoic chamber. An anechoic chamber is a very robust, what is called a Faraday cage, but it's millions of dollars. And my work had been, the word had been getting out about the work that I was doing, and I was invited by a couple of government agencies, and they brought me overseas. I had to sign an NDA, but they wanted me to test their family members and diplomats within their embassy. In addition, they allowed me to bring people over who I felt were victims of this, so I can test them there. So we took controls. That means someone who doesn't have any symptoms, and we would put them in the anechoic chamber, and we weren't detecting any signals, which is what we would expect.
Right.
But when we took the people who were tested in the preliminary RF scan and put them in the anechoic chamber, we were detecting signals. So what that meant to us is that for some reason, these emissions have to be coming from their person. And so what ultimately I'm going to explain to your audience is that we started removing implants. And I'm going to share that with you and show you what they look like.
So implants in people that don't belong
Correct.
there, that they did not, that they didn't know were there
Consent to.
and consent to.
They did not consent to at all. Okay.
All right.
Are you able to see my screen right now?
Okay. So, folks, if you're listening on the radio, all I can say is come over to GhostBox Radio on Facebook and check out what Jesse is going to be showing us here visually. We'll try to be audible about it as well.
Yeah, and I will explain what I'm talking about here and describe this. So this is an early case. So back in the early onset, what I'm going to show you is what the implants looked like back then. This is actually the Bob Boyce case. This is actually a cancerous tumor, and at the end of these tweezers here is an RFID chip. Okay,
Super
now,
small.
Bob Boyce was an he was an inventor of a high efficiency engine, and he had a Faraday cage, and he was. When I spoke to him, he said, "Jesse, I just succumbed that I'm going to die from this cancer," because he was told it was terminal. And when he was in the Faraday cage, he used a frequency scanner just like I had shown you, and the wand had brushed by his shoulder and it pinged. And they thought that was odd. So he got an x-ray, and that's how they found this tumor within the RFID surrounded by the tumor.
Wow.
Now, I asked him what happened to the chip. He said they took the tumor to pathology, and then the chip disappeared. So, I'm not surprised about that. But the one thing I was surprised, I was happy for him that happened. And he said, yes, my cancer went into remission, but it did come back very aggressively. So he went back into the Faraday cage, rescanned his person, and they found a secondary chip. This time they were smarter about it, and they used a chain of custody, and they had it analyzed. They got the serial number, and it was traced back to an NSA database. Now, interestingly enough, Bob liked Mountain Dew, and he said one day he was in his office and his business partner brought him a Mountain Dew, and then he lost track of time. He fell asleep for 3 days in his office, doesn't know why. And then this is when his nightmare began. But it turns out that his business partner was a former NSA employee, and so he strongly believes that that's how it happened. Now, the whole case got stonewalled because they said this was a national security issue. Okay? I'm going to show you another case. This case here is the Dave Larson case. Mm-hmm. Now, Dave Larson was a politician out of Southern California, and I'm going to increase the size here so you can see just how small these things have become. Now, this is the letter on a penny. Mr. Larson had many of these implants removed from his person.
Oh my God.
And he sued. And all of these implants all trace back to a medical company. And what they were doing is they were receiving and transmitting signals to him to get real lifetime data from these implants, all these biosensors. He lost his lawsuit because the judge threw it out because he unwittingly signed up to be in an experiment. And the issue there is this is part of our fight, is that if a person is involved in an experiment, they should be given full disclosure, because if you don't, it's deceitful and situations like this will arise. Because if he knew that this is what they were going to do to him, he would never have done it. Okay?
Wow.
Now, the next case I'm going to show you is where we're at today, which is pretty scary. This is one of my clients that was involved in the initial onset of our radio frequency testing in California. And this young lady had 3 specimens removed. And these specimens all turned out to be implants dispersed throughout her person at locations where she came up positive on the RF scan. And this is what they look like today. They're very, very tiny. You can fit hundreds of these into the tip of a needle these days.
Oh, geez.
These are nanowire arrays. Our bodies don't reject them, so they encapsulate them. And again, just like the Larson case, there are various shapes and sizes. And a lot of time they look like biological material.
Yeah.
But you can see through the spectroscopy reports that are in this report that they're not. It clearly states that these are biosensors. And now they're even smaller than this today. They are now 1/1,000,000th of a nanosize, of a millimeter, I mean. Now that's to get the perspective of how small they can be. So 1/1,000,000th of a millimeter. So 10 to the negative power is how small they are today. So now you can put literally thousands of these in a needle. And this is where we're at today. And this is what we really strongly feel is the reason why these people who experience this AHI phenomenon, they have to be receiving a signal for some reason. Colonel Egren from the Department of Homeland Security expressed that this is a slow kill. Remember, they're going after the best of our best.
Right.
And they believed it was a directed energy weapon. They believed that there was the Russians that were doing this. And in some cases it was. There were some classified cases that were going on in Florida where it indeed was the Russians aiming a directed energy weapon at certain individuals and they were having these symptoms, okay? But the issue was the majority of people who were suffering from this were saying that they can go anywhere. They would be in their car driving. They would be at home. They would be out at a party or a gathering, and it would still be afflicting them. So after we were doing our study, we were coming up to a conclusion. What is special about these individuals, unfortunately, that is allowing them to obtain this signal? And so this is why we had that theory that there has to be something within their person. And we were able to prove that by getting them into the anechoic chamber, and ultimately having the surgeries allowed us to identify what these were. And that's where we're at today.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we go ahead? Let's take our first break. When we come back, there's a lot more that Jesse has prepared for us to learn more about this. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Stick with us through the break. You're going to want to check out what's coming up next. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. You guys, if you have an opportunity, if you can do so, join us September 30th. You just heard the commercial for it. This event that we're going to be doing at the 300 Clifton Mansion in downtown Minneapolis is going to be amazing. Once again, it's going to be a trolley tour where we're going to actually stop at one of the locations. They don't do that. So that in itself is going to be amazing. When we get closer to it, we'll say where we're going to be stopping, but also an investigation of the mansion in places that they do not normally allow people. This is one of a kind, folks. If you have the opportunity, please sign up. Go to 300clifton.com to get your tickets. This is going to be great. It's going to be led by myself, Char Savoy, John and Norman are going to be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. So please go check out the link and hope to see you there. We are having quite the conversation tonight with Jesse Beltran. He is the visionary president of Cosmic Clarity Connections, LLC. We are talking about the abuse of covert technologies. We only got really started with this. There's a lot that Jesse wants to share with us. So, Jesse, I want to let you do that. And let's continue. Last segment, we looked at a few of the cases, not all of them by any stretch of the imagination. What do you have for us now?
Yeah, those were just a few of cases that had over the last 20 years that have come to the forefront. And now we're pulling them out of individuals that we have done preliminary RF scans with. And there are cases working their way through the court system based on what we've done. What I'm going to do is show your audience a smoking gun,
okay?
Because we're talking about covert technologies.
Yep.
And then on the third segment, I'll show you, bring it all together. So the smoking gun here is a report that came out of a lawsuit that was from an RN. Her name was Dawn DeVore, and she worked for the Department of Corrections in California. And Can you see my screen?
I got it up.
Okay, great. So this is Dawn DeVore. This was in 2019. She sued the Department of Corrections because she became a whistleblower and inadvertently became part of this program. Now, interestingly enough, Exhibit 2 that she submitted to the court systems, I'm going to read to you. Now, this was a document that was only meant for high-level officials within the departments. This was not intended for her to obtain, but she did, and we're very happy that she did. Now, it says IntelliConnection, a security division of IBM. So this is confidential, limited distribution only, level 9 communication, and it's titled 2020 Neurochip Implant. It says the control of crime will be a paramount concern in the 21st century. We must be ready with our security products when the demand for them becomes popular. Our Research and Development Division has been in contact with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, the California Department of Corrections, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and the Massachusetts Department of Corrections to run limited trials of the 2020 neurochip implant. We have established representatives of our interest in both management and institutional levels within these departments. So they're getting their own people hired in these organizations.
Wow.
Federal regulations do not yet permit testing of implants on prisoners, but we have entered into contractual agreements with privatized healthcare professionals and specified correctional personnel to do limited testing of our products. We have also had major success in privately owned sanitariums with implant technology.
Wow.
We need, however, to expand our testing to research how effective the 2020 neurochip implant performs in those identified as the most aggressive in our society. Limited testing has produced a number of results. In California, several prisoners were identified as members of a security threat group. So they're doing this for our safety. They were brought to the health services at Pelican Bay and tranquilized with advanced sedatives developed by our Cambridge, Massachusetts laboratories. The implant procedure takes 60 to 90 minutes depending upon the experience of the technician. We are working on a device which will reduce that time by as much as 60%. The results of implants on 8 prisoners yielded the following results. Implants served as surveillance monitoring devices for the threat group. And you'll hear later, not only can they hear the environment, they can see the environment.
Oh, wow.
Implants disabled 2 subjects during an assault on correctional staff. So you can completely debilitate someone.
You shut someone down. You're shutting them down, basically. Okay.
Correct. Universal side effects in all 8 test subjects revealed that when the implants was set, so when it was sent a signal at 116 megahertz, all subjects became lethargic and slept on an average of 18 to 22 hours per day. All subjects refused recreation periods. Of course, if you're lethargic, you're not going to want to go out and do much. And it says during the 116 megahertz test evaluation, 7 of the 8 subjects did not exercise in the cell or out of the cell, and 5 out of the 8 subjects refused showers up to 3 days at a time. Each subject was monitored for aggressive activity during the test period, and the findings are conclusive that out of the 8 test subjects exhibited no aggression even when provoked. Each subject experienced only minor bleeding from the nose and ears 48 hours after the implants due to the initial adjustment. Remember, we were testing people and they're coming up positive around the jaw area. Each subject had no knowledge of implants for the test period, and each implant was retrieved under the guise of medical treatment.
Wow.
It should be noted that the test period was for less than 2 months. However, during the period, substantial data was gathered by our research and development team, which suggests that the implants exceeded expected results. One of the major concerns of security and the research and development team was that the test subject would discover the chemical imbalance during the initial adjustment period, and the test would have to be scrubbed. However, due to advanced technological developments in sedatives administered, the 48-hour adjustment period can be attributed to prescription medication given to the test subjects after the implant procedure. So blame it on the drugs instead of these foreign bodies that you're putting in their person. One of the concerns raised by the research and development team was the cause of the bleeding and how to eliminate that problem. Unexplained bleeding might cause the subject to inquire further about his routine visit to the infirmary or other healthcare facilities. The security windfall from the brief test period was enormous. Security officials now know several strategies employed by these threat groups that facilitate the transmission of illegal drugs and weapons into the correctional facilities. One intelligence officer remarked that while they cannot use the information they have in a court of law, they now know who to watch and what outside connections they have. The prison at Soledad is now considering transferring 3 subjects to Vacaville prison, where we have engaging implant research. Our technicians have promised that they can do 3 2020 neural chip implants in less than an hour. Soledad officials hope to collect information from the trio to bring a 14-month investigation into drug trafficking by correctional officers to a close. And this is the last page, and it gets even crazier. Essentially, the implants make the unsuspecting prisoners, now listen to this, a walking, talking recorder of every event he comes into contact with. There are only 5 intelligence officers and the Commissioner of Corrections who actually know the full scope of the implant testing. In Massachusetts, the Department of Corrections has already entered into high-level discussions about releasing certain offenders to the community with the 2020 neurochip implants. Our people are not altogether against the idea. However, attorneys for IntelliConnection have advised against implant technology outside the strict control settings. Under the present governmental structure, our liability would be enormous. While we have a strong lobby in Congress and various state legislatures favoring our product, we must proceed with the utmost caution on uncontrolled use of the 2020 neurochip implant. If the chip were discovered in use, not authorized by law, and the procedure traced to us, we could not endure for long the resulting publicity and the liability payments. Massachusetts officials have developed an intelligence branch from their Fugitive Task Force Squad that would do limited test runs under tight controls with pre-release subjects. Corrections officials have dubbed these potential test subjects the insurance group. The name derives from the concept that the 2020 implant ensures compliance with the law and allows officials to detect misconduct or violations without question. A retired police detective from Charlestown, Massachusetts, now with the intelligence unit, has asked us to consider using the 2020 neural chip on hardcore felons, suspected bank robbers, and armed robbery. He stated, Charleston would never be the same. We'd finally know what was happening before they knew what was happening. We will continue to explore community uses of the 2020 chip, but our company rep will be attached to all law enforcement operations within extraction crews that can be on site in 2 hours from anywhere at any time. We have an IntelliConnection discussion group who is meeting with the Director of Security at Florence, Colorado's federal supermax prison. The initial discussions with the director have been promising, and we hope to have an R&D unit in this important facility within the next 6 months. Legislative and executive branch efforts continue to legalize the implant technology, okay? Now, if that's not wow enough, I don't know what is. The problem is they are using this in the public sector. What we have found in our research is that you can take each and every one of these victims who come with us with AHIs, superimpose them over each other, and they all line up.
Yeah.
You can take military personnel who complain about this phenomenon, superimpose them over each other, and they all line up. And we had always wondered why people who had been incarcerated were coming up positive, but in a different way from the other subgroups. Now we know. They know it's illegal. This is why no one was supposed to have this document.
Right.
But the issue is, you remember when they're having these mass releases out of these prisons because of COVID?
Sure.
It kind of makes you wonder what was really the intent. This is a serious human rights issue, and Colonel Egrin said that again, he emphasizes this was happening to the best of our best people, our brightest minds, not only in the embassies, the CIA, the FBI, and it was taken them out of commission because if this isn't a threat to national security, I don't know what is. And so the question I always get asked is, how are they getting in people?
Yeah.
Well, we know that it has to be an injection, but now they are so small, they are in the nano size. It could be you can easily ingest them. I've been doing a lot of the research and looking at the nanotechnology, and this is in the research. It can be ingested, it can be breathed in. Now, I think the audience would be surprised if you were to Google and Google this question: what percentage of our medications, particularly pre-filled medications, are imported outside the United States?
Yeah.
And that number is 90%. And that in itself should be a national security issue. Because if you want a foreign agency that wanted to do something covertly like this is exactly a way to do it. Colonel Egren also says, not only is this happening, a direct attack on our homeland, he says it's happening on every continent with the exception of Antarctica.
Well,
and that's where we're at.
And that's the thing, though, too. I mean, there's so many pieces to this too that I know we're going to get through all of it tonight per se, but just how much medicine do you go when you go to a doctor that's injected via a needle or something like that? And the fact of the matter is, it's like, and I'm not trying to be a fearmonger here for people listening, but there's a lot of vaccines going around. I mean, this is stuff that can easily infiltrate. And it doesn't sound like you're talking about foreign countries, but I don't feel like that. I feel like that the danger is homegrown as well.
Well, here's our thought. The data really looks like the majority of this is experimentation. And we definitely know back in 2009, 2010, up until 2018, that was definitely the experimentation phase. Now, President Putin was interviewed in the Politico, and his comment, and this about cyclotronic weapons, and his comment is the first superpower to master cyclotronic weapons will be the superpower to rule the world. Now, which superpowers have this technology? We know the United States does. Mm-hmm. We know Russia does, and they're probably ahead of us in the technology. We know China does, yep. And we know the UK does. I interviewed a gentleman many, many years back, over a decade and a half ago. My organization did. His name was Dr. Barry Trower. He was an agent for the UK government, and he was an EMP expert. And he talked about these weapons, and he would talk about, back then, the scientists bragged about how easy it was to project voices into people's heads and make them seem like they're crazy. And he said it was a success if they committed suicide. And he says, what is being done today, what the scientists are doing today, if they were back then, they would have been hung. But they're getting away with it today. So it's either an arms race, yep, or it's a social engineering experiment. The document that I'll share in the third part of our segment is called New World Vistas. It's a declassified document by the United States Air Force in November of 1994. Now, this was over 30 years ago. And it's a 222-page report, and on page 89 of it, it talks about biological processes. And in it, it talks about these specific things that are happening right now in the present. And part of it talks about transmitting voices in people's heads. It talks about taking an experience set out of one individual's brain and imprinting it in another individual's brain so they would believe that they had that experience. So the big topic today that's out there is there's a book out there by Lou Alizano,
Yeah.
and they talk about pulling out the VA pulled out an implant out of an individual, a veteran who had an EAP experience, and then they pull out this implant, and it's surrounded by biological material that's moving. And we think we have an explanation of what that might be that needs to be ruled out first before you jump to the alien theory. I don't know how much time we have.
Let's go ahead and take our next break here. There's still a lot to go through, folks. We'll get to this break. Folks, stay with us. This is important information, and we're going to try to tie things up as best we can, at least within this hour. You're listening to GhostBox Radio on AM 950. And join me tomorrow on GhostBox Radio with Greg Bakun. We're going to see the return of renowned cryptid researcher Lyle Blackburn. He's going to come on talking about his newest book, Lake Worth Monster, the true story of the Greer Island Goat Man. I'm really looking forward to this. It's always great to have Lyle on. He's actually going to be in Minnesota very early in October. We'll talk about that tomorrow as well. Originally, we were supposed to have Refined Divine on Wednesday, and unfortunately, she is unable to join us, so we will find someone else to talk to. Not do readings, but we'll have a different guest on Wednesday. Thursday we'll be talking about Robert the Doll with David L. Sloan, and of course Friday is Casual Friday. I do have to say, Jesse, that the show in the past has always been one where some people, we tell ghost stories and stuff, and people get really scared of what we have to talk about on here. This is a different dimension to this. This is a different sort of scary. People in the comments are like, this is spooky. This is really disturbing. It should be, quite frankly, right? I mean, and you have about, unfortunately, you only have about 8 minutes left. So,
well, 8 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I want to just briefly show this declassified document that we obtained through a FOIA release, and it's called New World Vistas, and it's from the Defense Technical Information Center, and this was released 30 years ago, so remember that. And remember I mentioned biological process controls.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read the whole thing, but where I am going to read a little paragraph. It said it would also appear possible to create high-fidelity speech in the human body, raising the possibility of covert suggestion and psychological direction. When a high-power microwave pulse in the gigahertz range strikes the human body, a very small temperature perturbation occurs. This is associated with a sudden expansion of a slightly heated tissue. This expansion is fast enough to produce an acoustic wave. If a pulse stream is used, it should be possible to create an internal acoustic field in the 5 to 15 kilohertz range, which is audible. Thus, it may be possible to talk to selected adversaries in a fashion that would be most disturbing to them. In comparison to discussions in the paragraphs above, the concept of imprinting an experience set is highly speculative, but nonetheless highly exciting. Modern electromagnetic scattering theory raises the prospect that ultra-short pulse scattering through the human brain can result in reflective signals that can be used to construct a reliable estimate of degree of central nervous system arousal. The concept behind the remote EEG is to scatter off action potentials or ensembles of action potentials in major central nervous system tracts. Assuming we will understand how our skills are imprinted and recalled, it might be possible to take this concept one step further and duplicate the experience set in another individual.
jeez.
This is where we're at today.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to mention two names. Myron, Aaron Alexis was a gentleman. He was a soldier who called me one day experiencing these symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been coaching people on how to deal with it because it is a long process. It's not a short-term fix. And what initially happens, because you have these things that are happening, you're so bizarre, you're either in fight or you're in flight. And there was another Well, and Aaron unfortunately went and killed 16 people at the Navy Yard over on the East Coast, and I never knew that he was going to do that, because
Sure.
if there was some way I could have prevented it, I would have. Myron May was an attorney out of Florida. Same thing, gave me a call, wanted some help, and his quote, he couldn't wait that long. He had bigger fish to fry, so he goes and killed 3 people over at the research center at the university. This technology will get people to do things that they would not normally do, particularly if you're highly suggestible. There's a gentleman, Ewan Cameron. He was a Canadian psychiatrist, and he was hired by the United States government and given funding to see if he could erase human memories and re-imprint them with false memories. And he used in its infancy what was called psychic driving. He would put people to sleep with drugs for long terms, for months at a time, put this helmet over them, and it had a tape recorder in it. And it would repeat themes over and over and over again during this tenure. That was psychic driving in its infancy. Now what's happening, you're affecting people 24/7, 365 days a year. And so this is psychic driving on steroids. And that's where we're at today. So when people say this is spooky, this is disturbing, it really is. I had an interview with an investigative scientific reporter, and she shared some information with me. She said during the 70s to 2005, the definition of what human was changed in the rule of law. And I never could understand what she was getting at until she told me at the end. Nowadays, they're using self-replicating, self-assembling nanotechnology. It can actually attach to your DNA when it's injected to you, in you. And in the research articles say, it only takes 6 generations to change a species. And she said that is the ultimate agenda. Eventually, there's going to come a point where we are no longer defined as human, and then you're going to be owned. Patents can be taken out by your governments and these corporations. Now, I didn't believe it at first, but I have to say I have to give it some credence, because I was invited to the Presidential Bioethics Commission at the University of San Francisco Teaching Hospital. Amy Gutman was the chair. She's now the ambassador to Germany at the UN. And during that, they were talking about wanting to get the genome on every living organism on the planet so they can have the rights to it. And by that definition, what did that mean? They were getting at this exact same topic that this investigative reporter was telling me. They're wanting to get a patent on every living organism, including you. And she said that they are the top 1% of the elite 1% that should be making decisions on what we do to our bodies. That we are too stupid to make sound decisions on what's best for us. And that is the mentality out there. And so this is why it's important that I talk to the general population, because this has been a very small umbrella over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Only the people who are suffering from this we're talking about it, and everyone labeled them as a tinfoil hat. But we have proof now. So you can't say it's a conspiracy theorist. You can't say it's tinfoil hat topics. This is real, and this is in your face. So what needs to happen is that all of us need to band together, and we need to step up, and we need to start talking about how technology has surpassed our laws, and that we need to very aggressively address this issue as an entire species,
right?
While we can continue to call ourselves humans.
It's about control. It's about utter control that we don't, and like you said, we're apparently too stupid to make up our own minds on anything. I do have a question in the comments. Chuck would like to know, where can someone find any more research online about what we're talking about here?
It's everywhere. When you research nanotechnology, interesting enough, BlackRock, of all, I don't know if you know what company BlackRock is. They are actually research in the phase of researching and developing a nanoarray system that has over 10,000 nodes that connects to your neurons. And it specifically says they inject this in you and they can manipulate human control and thought processes. I will leave a link for you so that you can share with your audiences, and it'll be a directory that'll have all this information in there that you can look at. And then your audiences are out there, which are good researchers. You can definitely look out there. Who's doing this? Raytheon's doing this. I said BlackRock, obviously IBM.
Yep.
And a little thing about IBM, if you remember during the concentration camps, who came up with that punch card system? It was IBM.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And you just saw that document. They try to keep it hidden, and they're afraid of all these liabilities and the publicity. But mainstream media won't cover this stuff, and so we have to use these formats in order to get it out there.
Wow. I mean, it blows my mind. And you said it would. You said it was going to blow my mind, and I don't. I mean, so folks, and then Linda also said search Mind Nexus. That will work as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that will. Yes.
All right.
Yes, we definitely get information.
Oh my gosh. So tomorrow when I do my recap of the show and I put out the link, I will put that link in there for people to go and check out the links and stuff. And Jesse, at some point I'm gonna need to have you on, and while we're talking, I'm thinking we got to see if we can do a 2-hour show or something like that. Some kind of special.
Yeah, be more than happy to. Yeah, be more than happy to. And like I said, in that link, you'll be able to see the implants that have been pulled out of people, the implants that are being pulled out of my clients. This is very ongoing, and it's a very fluid situation. Unfortunately, what's happening is these physicians who are heroes that remove these implants are being threatened with their licenses being revoked, and so we're now having to be creative in how we get surgeries for these victims.
Gosh, this is just like so much to kind of take in, folks. When I'm done here, I'm gonna re-listen because there's so much to kind of take here. I recommend everyone do that. We'll talk with Jesse. We'll see if we can get something special going here so that we don't just have to keep it to an hour, okay? Jesse, thank you so very much. Really appreciate tonight and the eye-opening conversation.
Okay, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. We'll be back tomorrow with Lyle Blackburn. Everybody, try to have a good night.